This is Bob Bloom, lead organizer of GTA PHP or Region PHP in Laravel Toronto. On June 10th, 2021, we were fortunate to have Ramsey present Dev Tools for PHP. I split this recording into two parts, parts 1 and 2. He has about 70 odd links in his slideshow. I have these links as well. I put them on my website. The link is in the notes of this video.
The commit message is did some stuff, which has a problem. The subject line has to start with an uppercase letter, according to the Chris Beam's school of thought for a commit message. So we'll git commit again. This says done. And now I'll say did some stuff with a capital D. All right, and that passed. Okay, so I'm not sure why it's printing this message out right now. But that hook is disabled because it's set to false. Prepare commit message is also disabled because it's set to false. Normally, if you don't enable these, they just don't show up in the output. I think I know what's causing it to show up, but I don't want to go too deep down that rabbit hole right now. So our composer test ran, our commit message ran, everything was good. And we can look at our log and see that. All right, so the important thing here, though, is, The important thing here, though, is now we have a way to set up things that should block commits before we ever make the commit. Like if we have a coding standard problem, or we've written our a commit message in the wrong way, then we're able to block that, and we can share this across the board with our teams. We can build our entire workflows, like even into our commit hooks or our Git hooks. Sorry, I keep calling them commit hooks, but they are Git hooks. So yeah, we're able to build a workflow that is a composer plugin that we can ask our team members to run, or we can take that plugin and the tools that it uses and drop it right here into CaptainHook and say, run this whenever we try to make a commit. And it will enforce it, and our team members don't even have to think about it. There are some other things we can do too. Like I could say, I don't have an example, and I don't want to get into it here. Like I don't want to try to live code it here, but I could say, run PHP CBF first, or run PHP CS fixer first, and fix the code, then run composer test to run all the tests. It should pass now because I fixed the code. Psalm also has a static analysis fixer called Salter that you can run, and it will try to fix anything it can fix. And a lot of these things can be fixed. A lot of the basic kind of errors can be fixed. And then when it runs composer tests, everything will pass, but then we would want to stage those commits. So we could put we could stage the commits with like git add, and then when the commit message gets accepted and it does the commit, then it automatically fixed your files for coding standards issues. So a developer didn't have to, sorry, I hit my microphone. A developer didn't have to do anything to think about, right? They just made their changes, they did a commit, and it fixed whatever coding standards issues they had in place. They can move on to do the rest of their work. No one argued about the coding standards issues. It fixed them for them. No one had to like do a code review on those kinds of things. Now they can do a code review on the important things, which is like the architecture and like how they implemented something. So I think that those are really critical and important for the ability to like have an effective and working team. Teams might not agree on the coding standards, but hopefully you can get to a point where they'll agree that consistency trumps everything, and even if they disagree with the standards, as long as they're in place and they can be fixed easily with little friction, then they can go on with their lives and not worry too much about it. So let me go back here. I think that concludes the live coding part. Yes, it does. So I will go back to my slides. And I have run a little bit overtime here, so I apologize. Let me get back to this though. I wanted to talk about PHPCS Fixer a little bit, just because Peter mentioned that he prefers that. I'm not going to go through and talk about all of these. I asked on Twitter the other day, like, what are some tools that you really enjoy and that help you out? And so lots of people gave me lots of ideas. I'm not going to go through and read all of these. I do want to point out a few of them. I already talked about CaptainHook. Composer Normalize is another one that I like to use. It is a plugin for Composer. It is not built into the Composer, so you have to, I should have put the package name here instead of the command name. But if you look it up, it should come up for you. It puts your Composer file into a normalized format. So you probably know that there's a way to tell Composer to sort your packages alphabetically. Well, Composer Normalize will then also sort the other properties around into its own opinionated order, which for me, I don't care what order they're in, as long as they're always in the same standard order. So that's why I use Composer Normalize. And so anytime anyone commits something to Composer, this will run and then like normalize it, put it in the right place, or keep it there if it's already in the right place. So I like that. Composer Validate is another thing that's helpful. It really just validates the syntax. It doesn't validate, it doesn't move things around. But I think Composer Normalize also validates the syntax. I think I might call that. Let's see. PHPCS Fixer was another one that was mentioned. In addition to, where is it? Simplify Easy Coding Standard, which is on this page. So Simplify, what? Okay, sorry. Simplify Easy Coding Standard is a way to write your coding standard configuration in pure PHP instead of an XML file, which has the benefit of knowing when you typoed a class name. So that's very useful. But also the biggest benefit is that you can combine rules from both PHPUnit and PHPCS Fixer. I'm sorry, not PHPUnit, PHP Code Sniffer. You can combine rules from PHP Code Sniffer and PHPCS Fixer. So if there are things in PHPCS Fixer you like, and there are things in PHP Code Sniffer that you like, and you normally have to run them at this like separately, or you could put them together into a workflow like we discussed, or you can use Easy Coding Standard and use its configuration to combine to pull in both into the same configuration. So it's really kind of useful in that way. A lot of people love PHPCS Fixer. It's pretty opinionated on how it works. PHP Code Sniffer is very loose and lets you kind of pick the standards you want to use. PHP Easy Coding Standard kind of gives you the best of both worlds. Let's see if there's anything else I wanted to point out. Rove Security Advisories is also super helpful. It is a thing that you pull in using just dev master from it, because you always want the latest no matter what, because it's going to block you. The way they do this is anything that has any version of another package that has a security vulnerability, they put it in there as conflicting. So if you try to pull down, if your Composer lock file or even your Composer JSON points to a version that is in the security advisories, it will scream at you and say, there's a conflict. And the main conflict is because there was a security advisory for it. Let's see if there's another one that I want to point out. There's
What's the name of that security?
Rove Security Advisories.
Rove?
ROAVE. Roav.
Okay, thanks. That sounds really good.
That's maintained by
Rove.
It's maintained by Rove. I'm trying to say it's maintained by Okra. I can't pronounce his Twitter handle. And my
Okramius?
Yeah, Okramius. And my brain just completely went out and forgot his name. So I'm like, if he watches this later, I'm very sorry.
That's not Marco Pavetta.
It's Marco Pavetta. Thank you.
Yeah.
Marco, sorry.
I blanked for a moment too, but it came to me.
Yeah. PHP parallel lent is nice. It's the same as PHP-L, but if you've got a really large code base, it parallelizes it and will be quicker on it. There's other things in here that are super. Oh, Lando is another one that I thought was really helpful for a team that needs to like. It's raining in the background here really hard. So Lando allows your team to codify like what your environments should look like so that you can start up a local dev environment very quickly using their configuration. So it's a command line tool that allows you to do that. It's super helpful for a team situation, maybe even for like an individual developer if you have like common recipes for environments that you want to use. PHPCS Extra is a bunch of different sniffs for PHP Code Sniffer. Yeah, so that's a lot of more tools to look into. Again, I mentioned that you can search packages for Composer plugin and just kind of crawl through there and look at what other plugins are available and see if there's anything that you find helpful. Thank you very much. I am available for all manner of questions, even if they're not related to trying to streamline your workflow with tools. But I'm happy to hang out for as long as you all want to hang out and talk.
I got a quick one for you, Ben. At some point during your talk, you just sort of glazed over something real quick. I think you said either you're using or you're aware of tools for microservices. Are there things that you could, maybe point me at? Because it's kind of a hot topic where I'm working.
Let me think what I said. So we use microservices is what I was saying. And a lot of the microservices share a lot of the same tooling. And so that's what I was kind of getting at there. So like a developer tools plugin or whatever is something that we share across all of our different projects so that the microservices can share that. We also have like a microservices starter kit that's just a separate repository that allows you to clone it, actually using the Composer create project tool. So Composer has a command called create project, and then you point it to a repository and it will create a brand new project based on that repository. Cool thing about it though is you can tell, actually let me show this instead of just telling, because I've got something I am working on that will help with this. Let's see. this was mainly for my own personal use. Like that's why I created the dev tools. And that's, why I create a lot of the things I create. It's for my personal use, and I hope it helps someone else. But I've been working on this package called PHP Library Starter Kit, which is essentially similar to something we use internally. It kind of does the same thing. This is not in a state right now that I would advise you to use. I have to push up a few more things to get it working again. But the idea here, if we look in the Composer JSON, so, and again, it has the security vulnerability thing there because I am requiring Composer somewhere, I thought. Anyway, if we go down under scripts, Composer has several built-in scripts that it knows about. It considers them special. And if you put any commands in those script names, it runs them like they're hooks. So one is post root package install. So what this does is it runs this command or set of commands after a root package has been installed, which I think runs after the create project command, basically, which this also does too. So I might be describing that wrong. But in this case, it just does git init to initialize a repository. Post create project command runs right after you've run the create project command. It downloads or it clones the entire repository that you've pointed to, and then it will execute whatever is here, which is this wizard start. So I built this so that it executes this command, and that walks the user through a series of questions that asks them about the library they're about to build. And then it'll ask things like, what's the name of the library? What's your name? What's your email address? It builds everything out. Then it gives you like a license selector in this case. And it builds everything out, puts everything into place where you want it. And then the user can go develop easily right away without having to think about all the setup stuff for a repository. So we use something like this internally so that we can do the same thing with our microservices. Anytime we're in the middle of a project or a plan to move things to microservices. We're not moving everything. We're just moving the things that make the most sense to be able to abstract into a separate service. And when we do that, we need a quick template to be able to set it up so that we don't have to go through all the initial steps again. So we use something like this as a way to create the project using a common custom template that we have. And then that template also includes like our dev tools that get downloaded so that when we do a commit, it runs our pre-commit hooks and does all the checks we want it to check. It gives us a standard workflow across all the developers who are going to be working on things. Does that help answer your question? I know it wasn't about microservices necessarily, but it was about like the workflow that we use to set up microservices and build in them.
Yeah, it's definitely an important component.
What specifically were you looking for on microservices?
I was thinking that there probably would be, let's say you're going to have, 10 services that are all going to communicate using an event bus. So you'll probably have some boilerplate in each of those applications for, talking to the event bus, subscribing to this and that, and whatnot. And I'm just sort of wondering, I assume maybe there'd be or authentication is going to be the same across all, right? So I'm thinking there'd probably be some Composer packages, that would facilitate that type of thing.
A lot of those things for us, we might use Composer packages to build those things, but like our internal way of using them would be different than what's off the shelf, I think. So we might have a separate library that we've built that's a private library for an event bus, or one that we actually don't have one for an event bus right now, but or we might, or we're building it. I can't remember. We do have one for logging. So everything uses the same logging library. It's basically like monolog, but it does a little bit of the custom stuff we need. It has some of the custom configuration set up so that when you pull it down or when you require it in your separate, service, it's already set up out of the box to go. Like there's no extra configuration the user has to do to make it work. They just start logging. And so I would say that for anything that could be shared across your services, like the event bus thing you're talking about, that could be built into a library. And maybe there are some packages that help you with events, like the league. The PHP League has an event package that we use. And so that might form the basis of your event bus, or maybe something else does. So we're using Kinesis as our bus essentially, but we're using the League event, the PHP League's event library to emit events that then go to Kinesis, and then all of our microservices. We have some microservices that read from Kinesis and then do things based on events that it gets. So all of those things that stitch that all together, we've abstracted into libraries that each service can use. So any service that needs to read events from Kinesis, we have a library that does that plugs into that service. Any service that needs to send events to Kinesis, we have our event package that uses the PHP League event package to send the events to Kinesis. It's just pre-configured. Logging is the same way. So like all of our logs go, they basically get dumped to standard error, and that gets read by FluentD, and that gets piped over to Datadog, right? So in that way, like we're just using a standard library that we create that just writes everything out to standard error, so that FluentD can then pick it up off of our containers. So there's some of that's set up that's outside the scope of like the code inside the container. That like the FluentD stuff is all set up, and that's set up by like our SRE team. And so they manage that through, I think they use, what's that HashiCorp tool?
Vault.
No. I can't remember. We use some kind of tool that manages configuration for our servers, and HashiCorp makes it. I think that's the one we're using.
Yeah. I heard the name today, but I can't think of it, or yesterday. Okay, cool.
Oh, Terraform. That's what it's called.
Terraform. Oh, Terraform. Well, I was thinking of something else, but yeah.
Yeah, Terraform is cloud infrastructure automation. Mm-hmm. So all of our infrastructure is basically described in Terraform commands or Terraform configuration or whatever it's however they call it. I don't manage that stuff.
Yeah, it's all right. Cool, but yeah, you're using similar techniques to what you just showed us today with the Composer,
right?
Stuff to share basically things across many different, because that's the key with microservices when you're building them, is the fact that you're not just building one application anymore. You might be building 100, and you want them to all look the same in certain ways, and
they're all going to do a lot of the same things, like error logging and sending events or listening for events. That's all common stuff. There's no need to rewrite that for every single service.
Okay. I do have another question, but I'm going to leave it to other people to ask some questions because I don't want to.
Oh, thanks, Adam, for posting Terraform there. Yeah, that's right.
Yes. All right. Well, it doesn't sound like anybody has any burning questions. So I have one that's maybe kind of an opinion question, but something that I'm kind of struggle with a little bit too is, so Composer, I see it as a command runner. And there are various other command runners, particularly, you know, when you get into JavaScript, people are using Yarn or NPM or whatnot. And I'm kind of wondering, I have one guy at our company that just loves Make. So he does all this stuff in Make. I'm like, you're driving me nuts, man, because this is, you know, I'm opinionated on things like that. But you know, what is your opinion on, you know, how far are you going to utilize Composer? Like, do you try to have like one command runner, or do you have one command runner that kicks off another command runner, or whatnot?
I think that depends on the team. But yeah, if everyone is familiar with Makefiles and wants to work in Makefiles, then Makefiles is a good way to go. I think what I was looking for was more or less like, so in the JavaScript world, and I didn't mention this at the beginning of the talk, but in the JavaScript world, developer experience is really front and center. In the Laravel community, developer experience is front and center. It's not something that is talked about in other parts of the PHP community as much, although it's gaining traction. So when thinking about the JavaScript world, so someone mentioned Laravel Tinker. So they've got the same shell. It's the same exact shell that I showed. They use for Tinker. But in the JavaScript world, like, it is common practice to put these things in your package.json. They've got scripts that you can put in there and call. They use tools like Husky and Lint Staged that sort of do a little bit like what I was showing with CaptainHook. And they use JavaScript, or they use Node as like their primary like their toolbox, their workflows. Some of them might like Makefiles too. Some of them might like other, like just bash scripts. But I think that you can kind of stitch them all together through a common denominator, which is package.json. So the same thing could happen with your composer.json. If you have Makefiles, you can have those and then call them from composer scripts. If you have a bunch of bash scripts sitting in your bin directory, you can call them with composer scripts. It's just a way to like kind of, I guess one of the ideal things that I had been thinking about a while back was, should I create like a console tool for all of the developer stuff we need to do? Like, we've got all these scripts and these bash scripts, we've got some Makefiles, we've got things that like do all these build things. And this was at a previous company. How can I stitch them all together? So I started looking at Symfony console as a way to do that. But then I realized I don't need to build my own console. Composer has this capability right in it. I can just put scripts into the scripts property, or I can build my own plugin that stitches these together as well. So that's why I'm focusing on composer.json here. I think that in a PHP builder environment, more people are going to be familiar with that. They may not be as familiar with bash scripting or with you know, how Makefiles look, which is basically bash scripting with some extra stuff. And that's my washing machine that's singing in the background. So yeah, like I'm focusing here on composer.json with scripts because I think it's a useful place to like stitch together all the things that you need for your team under PHP. But certainly if most of you most of your team are JavaScript developers, maybe it makes more sense to do these kinds of things in your package.json. If most of your developers are like DevOps people, maybe you use Makefile, something like that. Like use the tool that your team is most comfortable with, I think is my main bit of advice there.
Yeah, I mean, in our situation, that there's not necessarily a common denominator. We have a good mix of JavaScript folks, a good mix of PHP folks, and I'm also considering the same thing that you talked about of like, I'll just make like perhaps using Laravel 0, which is very similar to Symfony Console. It actually uses Symfony Console under the hood, but it's probably a little more
so does Composer
developer,
command.
a little
command,
more. Yeah. So Laravel 0 would kind of allow us to write tools in a language we're familiar with. And here's just my, where things fall down with the other things, whether it's Make or, NPM or even Composer, is like you're not in a spot where you have a language to work with. I mean, you could write a separate tool and then call it from one of these runners, but it's not really integrated into your application, and you're not going to necessarily be able to connect to your database and things like that you might want to do. So I'm just sort of struggling with it and just wanted to hear some opinion about it, but it's the usual answer. It all depends.
My opinion did not like, I didn't really specify an opinion. My opinion is use Composer because that's what I know. But
right.
Yeah, I don't want to impose that on anyone. But yeah, if that's a good common way of setting it up for your team, then use it.
Yeah, and especially I'm thinking, in a circumstance where it's for someone to set up a local environment, they may have to spin up, 30, 40 different projects that all have a Composer install or an NPM install.
That's a pain in the ass. And we're trying to
setting up env files, blah, 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 right? I could, write all of that out in a PHP,
We're trying to figure out how we can stub out the services. So like when you're working on one and maybe it needs to talk to another service, you just don't have to run that locally, right?
Yeah.
You could.
Yeah.
Like
if you some mock responses or whatever.
Yeah, but if you're trying to test the entire system, like web all the way through to our APIs and whatever, then you kind of have to have everything running, and that's a pain. I don't have an answer for that.
Cool.
Any more questions? I have a question about your being a release manager.
Yeah, sure.
When I read that it's a 3-year commitment, my jaw dropped. Mechanics for that. Do you have to sign something with the PHP project?
And so the little known secret about the PHP, well, it may not be little known, but the secret about the PHP project is there is no like central governing body. There's nothing formal. It is a group of people who have access to the source code, and they have a lot of knowledge about it. And in fact, Joe Watkins, the mentor,
right.
He wrote a blog post recently called, I don't remember what it was called, but it was something about the bus factor. So the idea that like if someone gets hit by a bus, then like who else could pick up the project? And he said he felt like he calculated that the bus factor for PHP was like 2. All it would take is like 2 developers going missing for the project to have serious problems.
But that's also about code that's really old.
Yeah.
Or specialized.
So for example, fibers recently got added, and there's very few people who would be able to tell you like what's in, like how that works. And I can't remember what the other examples were. But anyway, getting back to your question, there is nothing to sign. I kind of am curious about this myself. So I've been around the community for years. A lot of people in internals know who I am. They know I'm like a known commodity, I guess. That word is weird, but they know that if I'm signing on to something, like I'm not just going to disappear and go off the face of the planet and never be heard from again. That has happened in the past with some of the release managers. Like one of them would just kind of just disappeared. No one knows what happened. But the fact that there were two release managers meant that the other one was able to pick up the slack. And then also Patrick and Joe's been a release manager before, and Patrick's been around the community for a long time as well. So like both of us just happen to have the benefit of like when people voted and elected us to be the new release managers, we were kind of already trusted people who already had some access to certain things. And like if I went missing for more than a few weeks, then there would probably be people, texting me or sending me emails or whatever, trying to find out where I am. But no, there was nothing to sign. There's no, PHP doesn't have contributor license agreements. PHP doesn't have, like I said, that another developer kind of just, hasn't been heard from again. So that could happen. So I don't know what would happen if someone who was being voted on who did not have like the privilege that I have of being someone known. I don't know what would happen, like how you put your trust in someone like that and give them all the keys.
And I'm sure there's not severe consequences if you just decided, listen, I can't handle this anymore.
I'm sure if you were to bring, if you were to come up and like be forward about it and discuss it, that would be a different situation. If you were to just disappear without any kind of messaging, that's like a different situation. They can revoke your access to the repositories. Certainly it's in Git, so everything can be reverted if needed, if someone were to commit something that was damaging. Actually, that sort of happened not long ago.
Too long ago.
And they were able to revert it. So I don't know if anyone knows who did that yet. They know how they did it though.
Well, Sarah did a good job with that. A fabulous job with that. Did the PHP project ask for some type of assurance with who you work for that time-sensitive deadlines you would be available?
No. The main deadlines I have are, I think right now, every 2 weeks leading up to general availability, there is a release. And so I'm planning to be available for all those. We just do them in the morning, usually before I start my workday. And they're not going to take very long. We did 2 this week. Monday it took us a while because it was the first time either Patrick or I had done it. So Joe was walking us through a lot more detail. The next time we do it, it'll probably go very fast. Today when we got together and so we do Tuesday and Thursday. Tuesday, we actually tag the release and build the tarballs that then go up. And that gives the Windows team time to do the Windows builds. And then on Thursday, we make the announcements. So today we made the announcements to all the mailing lists and posted it on the website. And at this point, the Windows builds are already available, so people can pull those down as well. And the announcements go pretty quickly as well. There's not a lot that has to be done for those. And some of this has been scripted together. We went through what all the process was, so that we would know what is being done even if we run the scripts later. But I think a delivery person is here, and that's why my dog's going crazy. But yeah. Oh, the other thing I was going to bring up related to your question is sometimes a release manager can't make it. So like we have to just try to plan around that and let each other know what's going on ahead of time. So right now we have 3 people. In the past, it's mainly just been 2. But so for our next time, Joe is also kind of like trying to hand the reins over to us as much as possible, so that he's just kind of like overseeing. So the next time, Patrick and I will be able to meet together on Tuesday, but he won't be available on Thursday, but I will. So I'll do the announcements and stuff. So we just are planning it together and making sure one of us is available to do the releases.
Excellent multi-part interview with you and the others in PHP Architect Magazine, which the link is in the meetup note, I'm sure, give or take.
All right. Yeah. That was with Sarah and Gabriel.
And this repo that you did for GitHub Actions, I saw that somebody, I really didn't pay too much attention, but from Symfony or involved with Symfony as a contributor. And I was wondering, what was the genesis of that? Because that didn't seem like the kind of typical project that you're on.
Yeah. The genesis of this, it goes back to this PHP library skeleton that I've been putting together. So I have another talk that I started giving 2 years ago. Well, the only time, actually, there's been 2 times I've given it. One was at an Uncon, and the second time was at PHP World in Washington, D.C. And the talk is about building PHP libraries using the Composer ecosystem, and all the things you kind of you should think about. It is an opinionated talk. It's like what I like to put in my libraries, but it is as part of it, I've been building this PHP library starter kit that allows you to just start up a library right away with a few questions that it asks when you do the Composer create project command. And then it continues on to like let you get started in development right away without thinking about all the stuff around like the package business, I guess. So the license and what all like your Composer JSON and like the structure of your package, all these things that you have to start going. I find myself looking at other people's libraries and packages so that I can remember what I want to put in mine, like what directories and files. And so I started building this so that I didn't have to think about that much anymore, and also to help other people who are interested in building packages. As part of that, GitHub Actions, their workflows folder that you can put in your repository, I wanted to have like a standard version of that in there. And I found that there was a bunch of boilerplate on doing the Composer install. And that boilerplate stuff was like, there were 3 or 4 sections to your actions file that you needed to get it all together. And I thought there's got to be like an easier way to do this. Now, future versions of GitHub Actions will allow you to connect together multiple actions in one script that you can then use as a single action. That did not exist when I started building this, so I had to write everything in TypeScript to build it. But what this action does is it will install your Composer dependencies and then cache them with a cache key. And then the next time it runs, it checks the cache key to see if those dependencies are in the cache. And then it loads the cache and then installs your Composer dependencies again. It does not cache the vendor directory. It does what like your normal local system does. And when you require a Composer package locally, in your home directory, there is like a hidden folder that it caches the zip files for Composer for that package. That way, the next time you require it on a different project or even on the same project, if it needs to do Composer install and grab it again, as long as the versions haven't been changed and updated, it'll just grab it from your cache rather than having to go out to the web and download it. So this does the same thing. So it puts all those zip files in a cached location that can then be reloaded back so that when Composer install runs, it can run a little bit faster because it doesn't have to go to the web for everything.
So sorry, this directory sits at, like, let's say you had an organization. Would it sit at the organizational level, like
in GitHub? In GitHub, I meant locally. It sits in your home directory. On GitHub, it stores it, and they have some kind of cache place that's common that the containers use, and it'll grab it from there and mount it or copy it into the container or something. I'm not exactly sure where it puts it. You don't have access to see that cache. Like there's not a place in your organization where you can see it. And in fact,
but obviously, yeah, like across runs of the same repo, it would use the cache.
It does a hash on your composer.json, or if you have a Composer lock file, it'll do a hash on the lock file, and that's how it stores it. So if someone else happens to have the same exact contents in their Composer JSON file or in their lock file, which is rare but could happen, you'll share the same cache. But there's no real security implications there, because if their lock file is the same as your lock file, then you're both going to have the same cache. Now, I just thought about this. If someone were to copy your organization's composer.json and you were using private repos, it might be able to get a hold of that cache. I'd have to check that. That's an interesting security check I might want to look at. But it uses the same methods that everyone already uses for caching. It just does it all in one action. So it's not like doing anything different, really. There are some bugs that people have found with it that I'm trying to track down. Let me see if I can point one out. Like, oh yeah, you were asking about like if you could see that cache at your organization level. Someone was asking about the need to clear the cache. Like if something got stuck in the cache and they were having trouble picking up an old package, they might want to clear that cache. So you might need to try to do something on one of the runs to clear it. We'll have to figure out how that works. I don't know exactly. Yeah, that's why I built it. It was, and I did it in TypeScript because they had an example in TypeScript, and I like TypeScript better than JavaScript. So since I'm not like a big JavaScript or TypeScript guru, I thought it would be a good practice.
Well, there's a lot of doc on it. Quite the side project. Do you have any other questions? But it's leak package, UUID. I'm holding back because it's getting on in time.
I think
Going
Bob has lots of
once.
questions. It's been a pleasure to speak for you. So thank you very much for inviting me, though.
Well, thank you for being here. I'm glad you're feeling well, and
Me too.
at least if there's no way you can come up and cross the border,
I would love
this
to
is
do
great.
that. Yeah. Sometime in the future, we'll make it happen.
Are you gonna have like some show notes posted somewhere, Bob, with links to some of the various things that Ben has talked about?
I can also post my slides up that he can link to as well.
Okay.
On linking to his slides.
Yeah. Well, because it's just there's a lot of different like packages and links that he kind of brought up, and I don't know that I'll remember them all, but
The slides where I listed them, I'll try to clean that up and get actual links to those those. A lot of the ones I mentioned were listed in those lists. So I tried not to mention, or I tried to make sure that anything I knew I was going to mention was listed there. So I'll try to get that cleaned up with links before I post them. So I'll try to get them posted in the next day or two, and I'll let Bob know where they are, and then you can link to them.